Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire. Today we're here again with Murry Taylor, and we're talking about a really unique subject. This is the British Columbia Smokejumpers. I first came across the British Columbia Smokejumpers in the 90s when they became a base in BC. BC Smokejumpers, then I come across them when they would come and visit Missoula at different times, and also they source some of our equipment, and I visit them in 2014 in their base. And Murry here has their story, and this is a good story. I hope everyone gets a chance to hear this. Murry, can you tell the story of the BC Jumpers?
Well, I can tell you a cartoon version of it because I don't know the whole story, but I did write that article. And for anybody that wants to get the full story, it's in this issue of Smokejumper. That's this issue. And if all you have to do is go to the smokejumper.com, click on the magazine icon, and it's on page 21. And the title of it is Just Keep Them from Burning the Place Down. I'll tell you about more of that later. But anyway, all this started about a year ago this month, mid-August. I got a call. Billy Kramer, base foreman up in Fairbanks, called me, and he and some of the AK guys were over at Fort St. John's boosting those guys, having quite a rip-roaring time. And Billy said some of those guys came to him and said, do you know Murry Taylor? And he said, yeah. And he said, do you have any way of getting in contact with him? And Bill says, yeah, I think so. And they said, well, would you do it and tell him that we want to thank him for writing Jumping Fire, that it was that book that got us into jumping, and jumping has made a huge difference in our lives. It increased the quality of our lives and our thoughts about ourselves, and put us in touch with an amazing group. You know the whole story. This is what jumpers say. And they're so happy. And then so Billy told me that, and I was glad to hear that, of course. There's nothing I like to hear better than the fact that the book had some effect on people. But, and so then after that, I was thinking around here, that is so cool to hear that from them. And I had a little bit of contact with them on the border up there. I think it was 96 or something. I can't remember, down by Beaver Creek Station. BLM had 200 people on the fire. The Yukon had like 12 and a helicopter. And it's not true that they got as much work done as we did. But anyway, they got a lot done, and we were way over. It was BLM often way overstaffed certifiers up there and stuff at times. But anyway, so later I called the Yukon station. It couldn't have been. Yeah, it could have been then. That's when Al Silvers would have been there. That's right. And I talked to Al Silvers, and we talked about that fire. And then I asked him. I said, "How come you guys fight fire so much smarter than we do?" And he says, "Well, we just don't have the money to throw at fires like you people do." And at that point, he pointed out to me, "Here's some things we do differently." This is how I remember it. He said, when we jump a fire up here, they give the jumpers 36 hours to contain it. If we contain it, they'll bring in a native crew or two, and they'll take the fire over and put us back in position. Or if they don't need us, they'll let us stay and work. But he said, if we don't get the fire in hand in 36 hours, they back off and pull everybody out and take a look at their fire plan and say, well, we'll let this go, and we'll count it toward the allotted burned acreage in this unit according to the plan, and blah, blah, blah. And if it gets over toward, Spruce Tree Junction or something, where there's a post office and a bar and a store, he said, we'll go over there and take pictures of everything and put a dozer line around it and leave an engine and a dozer. And if we save it, we save it. If it burns, the government builds everything back for them. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper than throwing the money at the fires. This is one thing that's how I remember that. And then later on, okay, so around 2000, I forget when that was. It was after I retired. I was down in Baja, went down in Loreto there to meet a guy that worked for Alaska Fire Service, and the people around there told me, you want to see Mike, go to this bar at 9 o'clock tonight. He'll be there. So we went there, me and my other buddy named Mike, too. And we were sitting at the bar, and I hear this conversation in the background, and I swear that I heard the word jump spot or on final or something. And after a while, jump ship. And I turned around and looked at him. There was 5 guys sitting in the corner. And when I looked at him, I thought, well, this is how smoke jumpers look, right? I mean, you've seen smoke jumpers, man, oh man. When I used to see us in the airport when we were coming south, I'd stand back and look at that group in shape. Every guy in the best shape. So they look like jumpers. But I just mind my own business. My other buddy, we just drank another beer. And pretty soon I kept hearing something, and I thought, I'm going to go talk to them. So I went over there. I said, sorry for bothering you, but did you guys say jump ship and stuff? Are you guys by any chance smoke jumpers? And they said, yeah, we're British Columbia smoke jumpers. And one guy goes, I know who you are. I read your book, he said, this guy sitting at the table. It turned out we were staying at the same hotel. It was raining. We stayed there 2 days and partied with them at night. And then they said, well, we got to go. They had a Subaru station wagon and a trailer that was a camp trailer with a stove and shelves and 5 surfboards on it. They were headed down toward south of Todos Santos to surf. So we said, okay, see you later. It's been great. And then later, my buddy and I, we headed down there. And we drove out on that beach to find a camp spot. And by God, there they were camped on that Pescadero beach. So we camped right by them for about 10 days. And that happened to also be a site where the Alaska smoke jumpers, Chip Hood, even Togi Wheel, famous Yukon surfer Togi Wheel, was down there, and some of those guys. And so we hung out a while. I had kind of an affinity for those fellas. Of course, Mike, jumpers are jumpers are jumpers. And wherever you go, same with those Russian guys when they came over. But anyway, I talked to my girlfriend Stephanie, and I said, you know what? Could we go up there? And it's 1,000 miles to get up there. And we said, okay, well, why not? So we could go this October. We did go up there. And we got up there, and we went to a winery, which is the first thing. This reunion wasn't organized nearly as tightly and as detailed as ours because this was their first one they ever had. Lovely young lady was in charge of the organization. She was one of the jumpers' wife. I've got her name here, Emily. And anyway, we had a winery thing. There were 25 people there. That wasn't a big deal, but most people didn't come for that. But later, Mike, they were down at some brew pub downtown Penticton. This was in Penticton. What a beautiful spot that is. And we were all at the Lakeshore Lodge, in that beautiful hotel facing right out on the lake. And by God, but by the time I went down to go to that bar, I started feeling kind of sick. And I thought, oh, no, I must be coming down with some. So sadly, I had to go back to the room, and Stephanie went and got COVID test. Anyway, brother, that night when they came back from that brew pub, they were yelling up and down the halls and slamming doors and just raising holy hell. It was all I could do to stay in the room because I wanted to go out there and really party with these guys because, I knew what they were up to. And, like I wrote here, initially I wanted to make an effort to be there in the company of smoke jumpers, celebrate their love of smoke jumping. But when it came time to leave, I wanted to write this story, first of the Yukon Territory and then in British Columbia, because it's a story of what I consider to be bold leadership, So anyway, I stayed in. I took the COVID test twice in the morning. I was negative, so the test said. So I told Steph, I'm just going to lay low. We'll get some food. She brought some food. I said, maybe I can make the dinner tonight. And I had already talked to Mark Hill at the wine. We shared a table with he and his wife that night before. And they were going to give me 5 minutes to get up and make a quick hello from the U.S. jumper cadre and all. But so I did lay low, and I did feel good enough. I went down early and had a couple drinks to make sure that I could show up, because this was the thing we had come for. And it turned out to be a formal affair. This is something I don't think the U.S. jumpers would ever do. They came in suits and ties, and the gals came in formals and really high-class dresses with jewelry and everything. Billy Kramer was there. That was cool that he came down. That's one of the reasons I was kind of encouraged to go, too. But anyway, like I said in the book, Reinboldt, Tom Reinboldt, who's considered to be the father in British Columbia smoke jumping. And I can see why. He got up and made a speech. You know, there was an introduction by the MC. That was Mark Hill. He's in charge now of the Yukon Fire program. And then they did a little hello and thank you for Emily, the one that did the program. And then I had a 5-minute hello from the U.S. jumpers and the BLM jumpers. And we had a little talk, and I got a nice applause for coming up there for that. And then Reinboldt got up. My God, he gave a speech. That guy, I can see how Tom was so successful at what he did, because right off, he touched on the family. The father, the mother, the sister, the brother, the spouse. He went on quite a bit about his wife and how she hung in with him when he dropped out of college to pursue this program and all that. And boy, he touched all the bases, and he talked about how it was something he believed in so strongly, and how we needed to recognize all those people that had made it possible. The mothers who had suffered through the seasons with their smoke jumping kid out there and wondering they'd be dead or not. That speech just knocked me down after I heard that speech. Oh, I talked afterward. That right. I talked after that, and I said, man, look at this speech. Look what Tom said. So I didn't have a lot to add to that. But anyway, the story, as it's told in the book, this is a story that comes out of, right out of private industry. And during the whole thing, I talked to John Hornig, who was, according to Reinboldt, his mentor, John Hornig. And so these guys, John Hornig, Dave Thompson, they worked for International Forest Fire Systems back in the day. Dave Thompson, they were Yukon jumpers in 75 and Hornig in 76. When they trained at NCSB and then moved up there. But these guys came from private industry. John Hornig, Al Sober, Dave Thompson, and Tom Reinboldt, and a few others, no doubt. They are the pioneers of the fire program in Western Canada. They came straight out of Kasawa, was one of the companies that, like I said, you can read about all the details in this magazine. But Tom, in 96, the Yukon government decided to drop the jumpers. And that was right about the time that Tom really loved that, and they didn't know what to do, and they talked about it. And he was going to college studying forestry, and he made a big move on the BC government to see if he could talk them into. It didn't work for quite a while, but he stuck to it, and he dropped out of college, actually, to pursue this full time. I guess in 98, they finally got $70,000. They got a crew. I don't know what kind of plane. They probably had a Twin Otter, and they were at Smithers, I believe. They started at Smithers. I'm not sure of that either. Now their main base, of course, is at Fort St. John. But they pulled that together, and it was an extremely successful thing right off. And the connection and support from the lower 48, like I wrote about in this article, was really big. A lot of it was from NCSB. Bill Moody would have been up there then until the end of that. Dale Longenecker started him out on his master riggers. And remember, I wrote in the article, Dale told him, look, we have to hurry this up because I'm not going to be here long enough probably to finish this with you. He ultimately finished it over with Jeff Kinderman in Missoula. So there was that, and then they got some old T10s and up in Alaska. Christ, they went in the cargo chute bins and got old T10s out and worked on them. And Tom did all that. Tom did all the modifications and changed the reserve pull on the T10 reserve. And like, I love it in this one part when he was working with Kinderman. Do you remember this part in there? TSO means a typical, what is it? TSO is a standard order, typical standard order, right? Technical standard order. But Kinderman said TSO up in Canada means Tom says okay. So they cut a lot of corners and they just did it. Yeah, Tom says okay was what TSO was. And so from there, yeah. And then he tells the story in there about when was that? I guess in 98, he was contacted, he said, by someone in the U.S., and I think I know who that someone probably was, about packing the chutes for the FS-12 or 14 or whatever it was, I think a 12 that they jumped during that History of the Smoke Jumpers video that the NSA made. Because the Forest Service, as I told you before, the Forest Service wanted nothing to do with that at all, which really amazed me and bothered me, really. After all the time they'd made political publicity, hey, out of the smoke jumpers are this, the smoke jumpers are that. And that was the result, and this is my opinion again, but pretty strong. I don't know that all this
And Murray,
is true,
that was a great video that the
came
Smoke
over
Jumper Association came up with.
It was. It was a really great video. And the head Forest Service person over there at that time in Boise was a woman named Mary Jo Lavin, who had come over from Washington, Fire or DNR or something. And she actually told the base up there at NCSB, no, you can't, don't help them do this. We're not doing anything out of a Forest Service airfield and stuff. And the people in Winthrop said, hey, this is a county airport. The Forest Service has got nothing to do with it. She said, all the same, we're not cooperating with this video. Well, the NSA, I think, was stunned when they hear that. I mean, good God, that was the birth of smoke jumping in the SPF. They were going to make a video of this. And for the Forest Service, this is how I saw it. So the NSA went to BLM. And BLM, this was the whole dust-up between Sean Cross and Skip Scott and Steve Nemor about the BLM ultimately went over there. Mike Tupper was a spotter. Nemor, Steve Reno, Bill Moody, Eric Hipke. Variously jumped in Wayne Webb and Francis Lufkin's gear. You saw the video. It's really great. Evergreen donated the Ford Tri-Motor. It's a beautiful piece of work. That got Nemor laid off and thrown down in the warehouse because he was insubordinate. He took the gear and they were told not to do anything and all. That's another story I wrote up also and Smoke Jumper way back and called The Bureaucratic Roughhousing of Steve Nemor. Anyway, this story here, Reinboldt said somebody called him from the U.S. and said, would you pack these FS-12 rounds and the reserves because the bases here won't pack them because they don't want to have anything to do with this video. So Tom packed them, and I want to read what he said here. He said, they asked me if I would consider packing and providing some SF-12 and FS-12Rs to a group filming a jump from a Ford Tri-Motor for the History of Smoke Jumping documentary. They didn't want to get in trouble with our government for doing that. But for me, coming from a contract world where rules were only followed if they made sense, I agreed immediately. The jump caused a shitstorm down there, and it was It was a bit of a mystery to which U.S. base packed the rounds. Mystery solved. No brag, just fact. But I never changed the attitude of doing what made sense. Then he goes on to say, throughout my career, talking with a jumper who used to work for me, he said, "You're retiring? I always thought you'd get fired." And Tom laughed and said, "So did I." So I wrote this because it's about bold leadership. And to me, there is nothing but bold leadership. There's no other kind. There's bold leadership, and that's when watered down, I think, a lot. This is what made BLM so strong in the past. This is the energy that Al Dutton released. A lot of people picked up on it and ran with it. But here's another amazing thing about Reinboldt. Coming down, when he'd go on a boost to Alaska or down to MSO, Missoula, they'd ask for 16 jumpers, and he would go as an agency rep and not a jumper, because if he went an agency rep, you read that part, another jumper got to go. But that meant that while he was there, the agency reps were non-operational, but he didn't want to stay out of the action, so he took his jump gear and jumped for free. So he jumped and never turned any money. He never turned in a time slip, so the bro was jumping Alaska. What a guy. I mean, this guy is amazing. And so, that's typical, and that's why he got such a standing ovation in that room that night. I mean, Tom, when he finished, those people wanted him to know that he meant so much. Yeah, he's the father of BC smoke jumping, and he said, "When we started this program, my friend and mentor gave me two sound pieces of advice. Never 9 to 5 it, and win people over one fire at a time." In the end, I'm going to wrap this up, but Tom Reinboldt concluded his remarks with, "Anyway, Murry, I could go on for days, but I'll stop here. I retired from the I will retire from the BC Wildfire Service on December 1, 2023. After 6 years gone from jumping, I will return to the jump list for the 2024 season. Why? Because I can, and it's a great way to bookend a career in fire by doing the thing that I love the most, that you and I love the most." Pretty neat. So, yeah, that's that. I mean,
and Murray, we both can understand that. Yeah.
Everybody can understand that. I sent them all, everybody I interviewed, I sent them copies of, and again, if you want to read the whole thing, it's in this is the current issue. That's Mick Swift, of course, and the tree. But, so that's it, Mike. Yeah. I was glad to be able to tell this story. And while I was there after dinner, this is a big ego blast for me, and I admit it. I'm not above liking my ego massaged. It was the same like McCall last year. Man, oh man, how good do I feel when a handsome 32, 34, 35-year-old guy comes up with a beautiful 30-year-old wife and two beautiful kids and thanks me for writing that book, because it did so much for his understanding of his work, of himself. And I look at him. It was the same in McCall. It's the same wherever I go to these bases. I just love these beautiful people coming up to me and saying, "Yeah, your book made a big difference." And it was a lot of work, but I'll tell you, it's a fact that the money came and went, but those memories of those people saying that, I'll take that to me right to the very end.
Murry, thanks a lot for coming on today and telling us about the BC Smoke Jumper program and more about the Canadians. It was really interesting, and everyone appreciates it. And thank you very much.
Well, Mike, thank you for seeing the value in this story. I was really glad to write that. By the time I left, I knew that I had to tell a story about that program up there. I think I may have mentioned this before. It's a story of bold leadership. These guys in this article are the pioneers of Western Canada fire. And they guts, pure administrative guts. I remember there used to be a poster there in Redmond when I was there in the late 90s by the ops desk, and it had a picture of a twin otter sitting on a ramp. It was a Forest Service twin otter, white with that black and red twin, sitting there at night, and it had rained, and there was mud puddles around it, or not mud, rain puddles around the airplane, so the light of the airplane picked up in the puddles, and the light on the ramp showed down on the plane, and across the strip out about a mile, a lightning strike had come right down and triggered the camera. And underneath that photo was written the word.
I remember that, Murray.
Do you? You remember it. It said this: in boldness, there is genius and magic. That's it.
It did, Murray. I remember now. That's good. That was brilliant.
And I thought whoever picked that up knows what we're talking about. And like I said before, jumpers aren't jumpers. The genius and magic in the Yukon was because they were bold. The genius and magic in the jumpers here is because they were bold and still are to some degree bold. It changed all of our lives, and yeah. So that's what I've got to say about that. Thanks, Mike, for doing all this. It's pretty neat.
You're welcome, Murray. I'm glad you're part of it.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.